I heard an anecdote from a vegan activist in Cambridge, England, that at one of these events, Cosmic Skeptic attended. Cosmic Skeptic, who is now rebranded as Alex O'Connor, whether that's related or unrelated to his hasty departure from the vegan movement and his adoption of and promotion of various anti-vegan platitudes. Alex O'Connor, Cosmic Skeptic, he's doing some kind of Q&A at Cambridge University, England. And I don't know to what extent this is an example he put forth or it's an example he was confronted with from the audience. The problem is put to him one way or another. What if a fish living in the ocean, a fish living in the wild in its natural habitat, will suffer more in its struggle to survive the joys and sorrows of being a fish swimming in the ocean, perhaps eventually to be chased down and eaten by a shark? What if the life of a fish in its natural habitat in the wild entails so much suffering that the fish would suffer less if you were to kill and eat it? Would it therefore be justified for a vegan or for Alex himself to kill and eat fish? And with some humming and hawing, with some, footnotes, of course, inevitably, Alex's answer is yes. Now, for many, many years on YouTube, I've been pointing the finger at this pseudo philosophy of utilitarianism and saying, again, there are many different headings. There is no evil that it cannot justify. And I think it's important to talk through examples of how ethical thinking works and how we get from kind of ethical philosophy to practical political action in a totally non-consequentialist, non-utilitarian way. What are the alternatives to reasoning things through in a utilitarian way? A fish in the ocean. You might think you can imagine the joy of exploring the realms of the deep. You fucking can't. You don't know what it's like to be a fish in the ocean. This is a leap of intuition. This is a kind of speculation in the mind's eye you are not really capable of. You do not know how much happiness that fish might have. It might reproduce, depending on the species of fish. We can't quite say it might raise children, but it might at least fertilize some eggs and have children. It might enjoy the company of its fellow fish in the school. What it is that makes life so wonderful, what it is that makes life worth living for a fish. It's hard to imagine. But another human being living right now in starvation conditions in Sudan, Africa, another human being born and raised amongst the Taliban in Western Afghanistan. It becomes pretty easy for us to start drawing up utilitarian conclusions about whose life is worth living and who would be better off dead. Oh, gee, now does it get a little bit uncomfortable, right? Now we shift to exterminating people because it would be politically convenient for us to exterminate them rather than help them. Now you start to get a little bit uncomfortable. This is why it's so important to jump on what Alex O'Connor has said about rape. Some of you in my audience, and I don't blame you for this, some of you thought that I was really just pointing the finger at Alex under this heading, what he has to say about rape. Because we live in an era when people on Twitter are being attacked for having said something racist or something mildly homophobic or mildly offensive or mildly denigrating to women that really wasn't intended to do such, as if my point was to contrast our culture of political correctness applied to so many people so unfairly and the strange sort of lack of judgment of what Alex has said about rape, the strange sort of lack of moral compass or moral average. That's not my point at all. It's really not. I'm not trying to herd my audience towards this kind of selective outrage. That's not my interest. Okay. Now, likewise, the leap of inference I've just invited you to make with me. Oh, if we can justify killing and eating a fish for the sake of the fish, for the benefit of the fish, to reduce the suffering of the fish, because the total amount of suffering this fish is going to experience in its lifetime, as opposed to if its life is cut short. Okay. Oh, what about people living in the most deprived, most war-torn conditions in Africa? We could take Libya as an example at the moment. We could talk about certain parts of Sudan, not the whole country. Darfur is normally gets the worst reputation. What about our political enemies in Afghanistan? How easily can we convince themselves that they would be better off dead than living out the rest of their lives? And how easily can we convince ourselves that we'd be doing it for their benefit as a charity to alleviate their suffering, to limit their suffering so they will have less suffering, and that we're not doing it for our benefit? We're not doing it because we want to eat fish. We're not doing it because we want to conquer and dominate Afghanistan. Now, just going to ask you a very simple question. Why have you heard nobody else talk through this issue? And just being real with you, it's not just Cosmic Skeptic. It's not just Alex. He represents a whole generation of these people who kind of come out of Discord chat, online debates, where they've really adopted this kind of pleasure-pain calculus, the fundamental elements of consequentialism, determinism, and utilitarianism, as if it is the only way to understand reality, the only way to make political decisions. And it's shocking to me the extent to which everyone involved, the members of the audience, the YouTubers, the people doing these kind of debates and dialogues and interviews, Alex himself talks to a lot of people. Rationality Rules talks to a lot of people. There are a lot of people talking about it before. And nobody is really sitting there and saying, like, do you realize that your political philosophy, killing the fish for the sake of the fish? So talk about this on kind of large scale. And it's easy to, you look at vegans like to talk about an animal holocaust, contrast to human holocaust. It's easy to think about this and talk about a huge scale of thousands of people being killed. How about just one person? How about just one fish? If a human being breaks into my house, there is a burglar who breaks into my house. I stand up, I turn on the lights, and let's just suppose this person is a drug addict, and let's say they're going through withdrawal symptoms, and they're completely out of their mind when interrupted. So their response is completely irrational. It's impossible for me to negotiate with them. And I am aware, based on various things about this person's appearance, let's just say they even literally have a glass pipe in their hand. Let's say it's just not debatable that I am aware that they are a drug addict. Let's just say, in all probability, this person is so far gone in terms of drug addiction. They've been a drug addict for so long. They have the signs of this all over their face and body, so on and so forth. Let's just say I can make the same kind of rational leap of inference that was made about the fish in the river. How much joy is this fish going to have for the rest of its life versus how much suffering? I look at this person and I think, you know what? This person is such a miserable drug addict. They're a drug-addicted burglar breaking into one house after the other. Can I convince myself that it would be an act of charity to kill this one person in the circumstances in which, in many jurisdictions around the world, legally, you can be confident you'll get away with it. Like, the person is a burglar, they broke your window, they're in your kitchen, they're having a drug freak out. Let's say theoretically you have a gun. The decision you have to make is just whether or not you pull the trigger. And you have a choice. You have a choice. Your other choice is to kind of call 911 and wait and hold this person at gunpoint, give them a chance to live and deal with the cops when they get there, when this person, you have a choice. There's a very interesting further moral conundrum here. All right. And I'm setting this out in such detail because most of the time, people say self-defense. Sometimes, in some percentage of situations, it really is a life or death struggle in which either one person was going to die or the other. And in that sense, it's self-defense. But a lot of the time, you wake up in the middle of the night, you hear something making noise, you hear someone rummaging around, you've got your gun in your hand, you turn on the lights, and it's a choice. It's up to you. Are you going to shoot this person dead? Are you going to say, hey, man, I'm calling the cops, and kind of hold him at gunpoint, kind of see what happens step by step, give him a chance to live, give him a chance to put his hands up or sit down on the floor until the cops get there? How are you going to talk this through? How are you going to act this through? In most cases, you're not overwhelmed with fear for your own life in that very moment. In most cases, there is a choice. What do you think Alex O'Connor's reaction to this would be? I mean, if he's really sincere, if he really believes in this, that you can project in the future, you can make a pleasure-pain calculus, and you can say with certainty, this person is going to suffer so much more if I let them live than if I kill them. And again, guys, the reason why I picked this example, it's not convenient for him. It's also not convenient for me. You guys probably all know I'm a very clean and sober person. I am open to the possibility that it is literally true. If this person lives, their life will just be unimaginable suffering every day as a drug-addicted burglar. And we didn't even mention this. They may cause a lot of suffering to other people also in what remains of their life, even just if they only live for another 6 months this way. There's an argument that I would myself be open to that however we think of calculating suffering, that some people are in such extreme circumstances that they're going to suffer less dead than alive. But my position is it is still wrong. You can't justify murder as euthanasia. It is just laughably, ridiculously wrong. I've made other videos talking to other aspects. So I'm just being brief here. I'm not really giving you a full philosophical reason for this. It is laughably, ridiculously wrong for you to say this person is better off dead than alive. And it is exactly the same mentality you need to commit genocide in Afghanistan. It's very easy to come to the conclusion. Life is not worth living if you are actually a religious fanatic, if you actually believe this horseshit. If you look at the life of a true believing fucking Taliban enthusiast, shows it's miserable. What a miserable existence. Isn't it politically convenient for you? Isn't it easy for you to convince yourself to believe that you're doing these people a favor by killing them, that the fisherman is doing the fish a favor? But even so, even from this, as I say, worse than Adolf Hitler view of the world, which utilitarianism inexorably entails, if a bear breaks into my house, and this happens often enough again, a bear comes in through the window, and the bear goes into my kitchen and starts pulling apart the garbage can, sniffing around for food, opens the fridge, whatever. This bear is kind of going wild in my kitchen, in my house, and I wake up and turn on the lights. Okay, the bear may now completely freak out and start attacking me. Bears are not very comfortable in an enclosed space like that, where they can't run away. They're used to being in the forest, obviously, and it perceives me as a threat. Okay, I can't reason with the bear. I can't call 911 and tell the bear to wait. Okay, so I may be in a situation where really practically I have no choice but to shoot the bear. And also, if I call 911 and I'm living somewhere where the cops can get there within an hour, again, with bear attacks, unlikely. You're probably out in the middle of nowhere where if the cops come, it's going to be 6 hours later. They'll just shoot the bear too. The outcome is going to be the same. The cops are not going to take the time to rehouse this bear, rehabilitate this bear. So you have a bear that's a direct threat to your life. There really aren't any great alternatives. You shoot and kill the bear. But you don't eat it. The justification for killing the bear in self-defense, right? Once the bear is dead, once the threat's eliminated, there's still no moral justification for eating it. There's still no moral justification for taking its skin and turning it into a rug, turning it into a piece of clothing, right? Those further steps are still evil, even if you killed the bear in self-defense. Let's go back to the drug addict that breaks into your kitchen. So the drug addict breaks in. You kill this drug addict in self-defense. Are you going to eat his flesh? Are you going to take his skin and turn it into a lampshade? Turn it into a winter coat? Oh, that's shockingly evil when it's a human example, and for some reason not when it's a bear, not when it's a fish. Look, over a period of almost 10 years, I saw and heard every argument of any significance in the vegan demimonde, not just on YouTube, not just on podcasts. I went through the published record, the formal essays written by supposedly academically respectable people with PhDs. I did book reviews, reading these incredibly boring books. So in terms of who my contemporaries are, what my competition is in the political philosophy of veganism. There's an old video on my channel, which is a dialogue between myself and Mod Vegan talking about the career of Gary Francione. And so it's partly a book review, his final book, and then looking back at his curriculum. So I really do have a good overall awareness and familiarity with what has been debated across the board within the vegan movement. And I am saying to you, seriously, the incredibly simple distinctions I've just pointed out to you, I think they never have been pointed out to Cosmic Skeptic, not by anyone. I think they never have been pointed out to Peter Singer. I think nobody has made these arguments before me, even though it is so obviously, hilariously obvious. All right. And this ridiculous philosophy of utilitarianism, it carries on and on unchallenged by what I could just call common sense. Although my own position is not merely one of skepticism, one of common sense, it's one of nihilism. It's a much further, deeper rejection. Nevertheless, people should be willing to reject it for these kind of pragmatic reasons. Okay, so I had another email. It's totally unrelated to Alex and Cosmic Skeptic, but you'll see why I'm quoting this second. I was asked the question, what is worse, killing one cow per year or killing 52 chickens per year? And the point is, with a particular person's diet, this is possible. You could have someone who generally eats a vegan diet, but they purchase one entire cow carcass a year and chop it up and then eat the little bits and pieces of meat over a couple of months. That theoretically someone could eat just one cow, whereas another person could kill and eat 52 chickens per year. So the question was put to me of, this is just one death, the death of one animal, as opposed to the deaths of 52 animals. So what's the difference? Now, the person who wrote this to me, I don't think they are a utilitarian. I don't think they're committed to utilitarianism or any philosophies. But unconsciously, right, or subconsciously, the whole phrasing and framing of this question, it is utilitarian. Now, I wrote a sort of long, sophisticated answer back in a series of emails. Okay. Moderately long, moderately sophisticated. Let's not boast unduly here. Describing a distinction between being morally opposed to something relatively and being morally opposed to something absolutely. All right. So really quickly, if you are morally opposed to cocaine, you ingest zero cocaine, you use zero cocaine. And you encourage everyone else to ingest zero cocaine, and you even support oppressive laws that will coerce other people to ingest zero cocaine because you are absolutely opposed to cocaine. Now, some of you will differ from me on this. I can ask the question, are you absolutely opposed to gambling? Do you want to have a society that tolerates gambling? Do you think it's okay for someone to lose $5,000 a year gambling, $1,000 a year gambling? And again, there's also time being lost gambling. Do you think it's okay to go gambling 4 weekends a year? But if it's more than 4 weekends a year, it's a problem. Like I'm absolutely opposed to gambling. I think nobody should gamble. I would prefer to live in a society in which gambling is absolutely illegal. Which the police close down illegal gambling operations. The majority of people apparently disagree with me. The majority of people, either they absolutely support gambling. They say, yeah, in unlimited amounts, let everyone gamble as much money as they want, lose as much money as they want, let everyone lose as much time as they want, laissez-faire acceptance of gambling that everyone can gamble to the utmost. Okay, so these are kind of three different positions. But then in between, there are going to be people who, in a relativistic sense, only partly oppose gambling. Now, another example that some of you are uncomfortable with, I'll just mention, my opposition to video games is not absolute. A lot of what I deal with on the internet is looking seriously at people who are addicted to video games, people who are in denial about the extent to which video games have ruined their life. I heard a comment from another YouTuber. This guy is known as Hiding in My Room. His real name is Daniel, or his real first name. And he uses the name Daniel openly. Daniel was talking about the fact that he had a long period of time playing video games for 10 hours a day. And then he enrolled in language classes. And he mentioned he didn't want to enroll in these language classes. He's a very lazy person and he's a video game addict. But he said that, so he was forced to enroll in these language classes for circumstances that aren't worth explaining. But he said that once he enrolled in these language classes, he was only playing video games for 5 hours a day. And he appreciated it so much more. Okay. This is the world we live in. We live in a world of fully grown adult men. He's over 30 years old, who play video games for 5 hours a day and don't think it's a problem. So in that context, it may often sound like I'm absolutely opposed to video games. But no, depending on your circumstances, you may have 5 minutes a day to play video games. You may have 15 minutes a day. You may not. You may have a full-time job and 2 kids and serious responsibilities where you really don't have 15 minutes or even 5 minutes, and you should take that seriously. But yes, even though I'm at this kind of very low end of tolerating video games, and I say to people again, dude, okay, there are 24 hours in a day, but how many hours are you awake for? How many hours are you at work for? How many hours are you in transit, like driving back and forth to work? When you're being really honest with yourself, losing just 1 hour a day to playing video games is a huge loss. And that's 1 hour in which you could be reading. You could be reading Cicero. You could be reading Thucydides. You could be reading Gouverneur Morris and the history of the American Constitution. Whatever. You could be reading something of real substance. And sorry, just give you an example. Not everything I read is so profound. I've read a series of books about stand-up comedy recently from people with decades of experience. I'm reading one right now by a comedy writer rather than a live stand-up comedy performer. And I'm learning just from his experience in the industry. I'm sorry, but it's still, when you compare it to video games, right? Even a book like that, an experienced comedian talking about their life experience, it matters. Okay, but nevertheless, there's a difference between being absolutely morally opposed to something and being only relatively morally opposed to something. And you can imagine, so I'm absolutely opposed to alcohol. Some people are only relatively opposed to alcohol. It's okay if you only drink. So I guess we could say at this point, I'm relatively opposed to caffeine. I feel like I should be totally opposed to caffeine, and we'd have a better society if nobody drank any caffeine. But I guess I tolerate caffeine in a way that I don't tolerate alcohol. And if that makes me a hypocrite, so be it. There's no reason for me to be comfortable with my own hypocrisy, and there's no reason for me to make excuses for it. But okay, so this is a distinction between being relatively opposed to something. Now, again, one more illustration. I have purchased video games for my daughter. I now haven't seen my daughter in many years. She was a little girl. I have played video games with my daughter. A lot of the video game stuff we own was bought for my daughter. I would never buy alcohol for my daughter and give it to my daughter. I would never buy cocaine for my daughter and provide it to her. I would never take my daughter to a casino and encourage her to enjoy gambling. All right. So there are lots of indirect indications of the significance of this. Okay. So here's my response to the question: is there a significant moral difference, or what really is better or worse? Which is the lesser of two evils? If you compare someone who eats 1 cow a year as opposed to just as opposed to 52 chickens a year. Okay. My moral opposition to slavery is absolute. I own 0 slaves, and I want to live in a country that contains 0 slaves. And I may add through legal coercion. It's not optional that we have 0 slaves. My moral opposition to prostitution is not absolute. I think that there's always going to be more than 0 prostitution in Las Vegas and Tokyo, and we have to ask difficult questions as to exactly how to regulate and delimit prostitution without aiming to eliminate it entirely. Okay? Guess what? My moral opposition to eating meat is absolute. You can play video games for 5 minutes a day without suffering negative consequences, especially if you have no job, no classes, no parental responsibilities, and so on. But you cannot play video games for 5 hours a day without negative consequences. So when you ask, what is worse, killing 1 cow per year or killing 52 chickens per year? My response is to ask, are you morally opposed to rape? Are you absolutely opposed, or are you only relatively opposed? This is where we'll come back to Alex O'Connor, cosmic skeptic. Now I ask you, what's worse, raping 1 virgin per year or 52 middle-aged married women? So, to me, this distinction is surreal and unthinkable. But think about Alex O'Connor's position. He's talking about quantifying suffering, quantifying happiness, so on and so forth, right? Who suffers less in being the victim of this crime? From his position, from the perspective of his moral philosophy, his political philosophy, this is a significant question, okay? I could put this much more, let's put a human face on it. Okay, I've read many accounts of torture in prisons from modern countries around the world. I guess I won't name the country here. But I got a description of being chained to a wall in prison from a political prisoner. And he said he could hear the woman in the next cell being raped over a period of months. And he heard the difference that, like, her first couple of weeks being raped, she would really scream and really fight. And then the saddening contrast when later on she was no longer fighting and resisting. She had been raped so many times with the guards or the soldiers coming and raping her day after day, week after week, month after month, that there was sort of barely any sound at all from the next prison cell or the prison cell in the hall when the soldiers showed up once again to rape her. So the contrast between the violence and noise and suffering of the earlier. Okay, so if you're working as a prison guard in that prison, as someone like Alex O'Connor may ask you, would you prefer to rape this woman who is a virgin and is chained to the wall and is going to suffer terribly and fight against you, or this other woman? Let's say she was a middle-aged married woman when she was brought into prison in the first place. She had some range of sexual experience before she got here, and she's already been raped hundreds of times by the other soldiers. She won't resist, she won't fight, she won't scream or won't cry. Okay? From Alex O'Connor's view of the world, from the perspective of cosmic skeptic, think about what the answer is and think about the consequences. Now, there are consequences we can think of when you scale it up, like there's an army conquering Afghanistan, conquering and possibly looting and killing and raping people, right? But the real consequences are about you. What kind of person do you want to be? The ultimate reason why I never use cocaine, never, is that I do not want to be a crackhead. I do not want to be a cocaine user, right? Like even taking away all the other. Guess what? The ultimate reason for refusing to participate in rape is that you don't want to be a rapist. And it should not matter to you that you are reassured by the other prison guards. Don't worry, this is a married middle-aged woman and she's already been raped hundreds of times by the other guards. Don't worry, she either won't suffer at all or will suffer less than some other victim in some other cell that she can be compared to. So if we put the question to you, which one is worse, raping one virgin or raping 52 middle-aged married women? Okay. From the perspective of someone who is absolutely morally opposed to rape, this is a shocking and baffling question to which they're likely to respond with, how would anyone possibly even ask that question? Or why would anyone possibly even ask that question? Okay. This is the kind of discourse we need in challenging people like Alex O'Connor, Cosmic Skeptic, someone who waltzed his way into an influential leadership position in the vegan movement. And I guess he's still in an influential leadership position in the atheist movement. Okay. It is not trivial and it is not shallow to challenge someone by pointing out not just that they're coming to the wrong conclusions, not just that they're preaching the wrong principles, morally, politically, philosophically, otherwise, but that they are asking the wrong questions. Political progress begins when we challenge those unexamined assumptions that are built into the questions we do and do not ask ourselves and others.